My name is Diane Voss. I am 27 years old. And the night my brother texted me a photo of my family celebrating in the house I had been quietly paying for, I sat in my new apartment on the floor with my back against the wall and made 4 phone calls that changed everything. I want to tell you what those calls were. But first I need to tell you how I ended up on that floor in the first place, because the story does not begin with the photo. It begins 3 years earlier, when I was 24 years old, and my mother called me on a Wednesday evening at 6:30 p.m. to say that the family was going to lose the house. The house was a 4-bedroom in Cloverfield, a suburb 40 minutes outside of the city, where I had just started working. My parents had lived there since I was 11. My brother Marcus was 26 then, 2 years older than me, and he had been living in the house since high school with no intention of leaving. My father, Dean, had taken a medical leave from his job in the spring of that year, and the disability payments had not fully replaced his salary. My mother, Patricia, worked part-time at a dental front desk and earned $1,340 a month before taxes. The mortgage was $1,490 a month. The gap was not complicated arithmetic, but they had been ignoring it for longer than they should have. My mother said, "We are behind by 3 months, Diane. We need help." I was 24. I had a supply chain coordinator job I had started 6 weeks before. My salary was $52,000, and I was still learning which subway stop was closest to my office. I said I would help while my father's situation stabilized. I said it the way young people say things when they love their family and have not yet learned where love ends and liability begins. What I did not say, because I did not know to say it, was for how long in writing with conditions. To understand why I did not say those things, you would need to understand a family I came from. Not a cruel family. I want to be precise about that because the story is not interesting if I simplify it. My parents were not bad people. My father worked a consistent job for 22 years and never once missed a school event when he was well. My mother made dinner every night and kept the house clean and knew the names of every teacher I had ever had. They were capable of love. They just had one child they worried about and one child they trusted to handle things, and those categories had been assigned before I was old enough to have an opinion about them. Marcus was the one they worried about. He had struggled in school and struggled after school and struggled at every job he tried for longer than 3 months. My parents spoke about his difficulties in the soft, cushion language people use for problems they have decided are permanent. Marcus has a harder time with structure. Marcus needs a different kind of support. Marcus is still finding his way. I heard those sentences my entire childhood, and I learned what they meant. Marcus needed protection, and I needed to be fine. Being fine became something I was extraordinarily good at. I was fine through my parents' financial stress in my high school years, when my mother worked 2 jobs and my father's back problems first started, and I made my own lunches and coordinated my own rides to school without being asked. I was fine through college, where I graduated in 3.5 years on a partial scholarship and a work-study arrangement that required me to work 12 hours a week in the university's logistics office. I was fine when I got my first job, and my mother said, "We knew you'd land on your feet," with a specific tone people use when they have not worried about you and are mildly surprised to have been correct not to. Marcus was 26 when the financial crisis hit the house. He had been living there rent-free since he was 22. He had cycled through an auto mechanic certification program, a brief job at a warehouse, and a longer job at a landscaping company that ended in the fall of 2021. He was working part-time at an auto shop for $14.50 an hour and describing his primary occupation as content creation. He had a ring light and a microphone. He posted rarely and strategically about a lifestyle that did not match the one he was actually living. My parents did not ask Marcus to contribute to the mortgage. I noticed that. I filed it away in the part of myself that noticed things and said nothing about them, the same part that had been taking notes since childhood. They asked me because I had a salary. They asked me because I was fine. They asked me because asking me would not wound Marcus's confidence the way asking him would, and my confidence had never been a thing they thought about protecting. The arrangement started with me covering the shortfall. $300 a month, transferred on the first, directly to the mortgage servicer. That felt manageable. Then in September 2021, my father's disability claim was partially denied, and the gap widened. The shortfall became $847 a month. Then the property taxes came due, and my mother said she could not cover them. I paid $3,700 in property taxes that October, which left my savings account at $614.22 for the rest of the month. By January 2022, my name was on the lease addendum as a secondary financial guarantor because the property management company that held the rental agreement on the house, Regional Properties Incorporated, required a cosigner when the primary tenants fell behind. I signed because my mother cried and my father said it was temporary. The property manager, a woman named Gwen Adler, sent me the documents by email and told me plainly what cosigner meant. If they miss a payment and you don't cover it, the debt follows you, she said. I signed anyway. By the time I moved out of my own apartment and into a smaller studio in March 2022 to reduce my expenses, I was paying $1,847 a month toward the Cloverfield house. That was the lease gap payment, the utilities auto draft I had set up in my name, and the homeowner's insurance policy that had been transferred into my name 2 years earlier when my parents' premium lapsed and the coverage was about to drop entirely. $1,847 a month. Every month. For 3 years. I kept a spreadsheet. I am a supply chain coordinator. I track things by instinct. The column for total payments reached $79,692 by March 2024. I looked at that number sometimes at night and did not feel angry. I felt tired in a way that was hard to name. Marcus knew some of it. Not the total. Not the cosigner clause. He knew I sent money because our mother had told him, Diane helps out, which was her way of making my financial responsibilities sound like a generous hobby rather than the thing keeping them housed. Marcus had been working part-time at an auto shop and full-time on a project he described as a content creation business, which had generated no income in 4 years, but had generated a significant number of opinions about how other people should live their lives. He had opinions about me specifically. The decision to leave the family home had not been mine originally. I had moved back in February 2024 to help care for my father during a second medical procedure. My studio was sublet. I was sleeping in my childhood bedroom and commuting 90 minutes each way to my office, while also managing the household schedule and my father's follow-up appointments. Marcus was home most days. He helped occasionally. Mostly he criticized how I arranged things. You act like you own the place, he told me one evening in March, when I had reorganized the pantry to make room for my father's medically required low-sodium meals. He said it lightly, the way people say things they want to sting but still be able to deny. I did not answer him. I went back to the pantry and kept organizing. In April, my father's recovery stabilized. The doctor's appointments became monthly instead of weekly. My father started walking without the cane on some mornings. Things were getting better. I began looking for a new apartment, something I could move into by summer. Then, on April 9th, 2024, I came home from work at 7:15 p.m. to find that Marcus had moved into my bedroom. Not moved in exactly. More like occupied. His gaming setup was on my desk. His clothes were draped on my chair. The bedding had been changed to a dark blue set I had never seen before. When I asked my mother what had happened, she said Marcus needed the bigger room for his work and that since I was leaving anyway, she thought it made sense to transition him now. She said it the way people say things they have already decided cannot be undone. We thought you wouldn't mind, she said. I noticed she did not say. We asked Marcus to ask you first. I noticed she did not say. We should have called you. She went directly to what they assumed I would do, because that was the nature of how my compliance had been categorized. It was assumed. It was structural. It was as load-bearing as the lease addendum that had my name on it. I went back to my temporary cot in the storage room that night and lay in the dark looking at the ceiling. I had my work laptop on the bed beside me. I opened it and pulled up my payments spreadsheet out of habit and stared at the column of monthly entries without adding anything new. 37 rows. 37 months. $1,847 each. The total at the bottom was $68,339 at that point, not yet the $79,692 it would reach by May. I looked at that number in the light of the laptop screen for a long time. The next morning I was at my desk at work by 8:20 a.m. when my phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. It said, "Hey, can you move the rest of your stuff from the room by this weekend? I want to get the closet set up." No question mark. No phrasing that acknowledged the room had been mine 6 days earlier. Just a scheduling request sent to a person he had already categorized as someone who had vacated. I stared at that text during my 9 a.m. team call and contributed almost nothing to the discussion of third-quarter shipping delays we were supposed to be solving. My coworker Priya caught me after the call and asked if I was all right. I said I was fine. She looked at me for a moment in the way perceptive people look at you when they know the word fine is doing a lot of work. "You keep saying that," she said. "I keep meaning it differently each time," I said. She laughed. I did not entirely. That weekend I moved my remaining boxes into storage without responding to Marcus's text. When I came to collect my things on Saturday morning, he was asleep and my mother was in the kitchen making coffee. She watched me carry boxes through the hallway without helping, without saying anything except, at one point, "Can you be quieter?" Marcus had a late night. I set down the box I was holding. I looked at my mother across the kitchen counter and felt something shift in me that I had not felt shift before.
It was not anger exactly.
It was the specific sensation of a person who has been patient for a very long time reaching the last millimeter of available patience and recognizing, with something close to relief, that they have finally arrived at the edge. I picked the box back up and carried it to my car without responding. When I closed my car trunk for the last time and walked back inside for a final check of the storage room, I passed my parents' bedroom and noticed, through the half-open door, a piece of paper on my father's dresser. The paper had my name at the top. I stopped. I read the first 2 lines from where I was standing. It was a list. My mother's handwriting, neat and rounded the way it always was. At the top, Diane's contributions, ongoing. Below it, in organized rows, were entries: mortgage supplement, insurance, utilities. The amounts were not exactly right. She had rounded some of them slightly, but the categories were all there. Beside the insurance entry, a note: "Check if we can transfer to Marcus's name eventually." Beside utilities, Diane may need to keep this through move. I stood in that hallway for 11 seconds. Then I kept walking. They knew. Not all of it. Not the cosigner clause or the exact total. But they knew the categories. They had made a list of my contributions, and the last entry was a note about how to eventually stop needing me. Before I tell you what happened next, tell me what it is like where you are right now, what the light is doing outside your window, whether the day feels heavy or ordinary. Because I want you to be present for what I am about to tell you, and I think the contrast might matter. I did not say anything to my parents in the days between that Saturday and May 3rd, when I officially moved out. My father hugged me in the driveway that evening. He said he was proud of me and that he appreciated everything. He said it sincerely, and I believed him. My mother said she would call when she had time. Marcus did not come outside. I drove to my new apartment. I assembled the bed frame. I was asleep by midnight. At 11:47 p.m. the following Friday, my phone lit up with a notification from Marcus's public Instagram account. He had posted a reel. The caption read, "New era. Welcome home." It was a video of the family in the living room I had just vacated. My mother was laughing. My father was in his armchair, looking comfortable in the specific way people look when they believe everything is settled. Marcus was standing in the center of the room holding a glass. Behind him, taped to the wall in balloon letters from a party supply store, was a banner that read, "Finally some peace." He had tagged my mother and my father. He had not tagged me. I looked at that banner for a long time. I counted the minutes on the clock in my kitchen, and I got to 47 before I did anything at all. Then I opened my laptop. The first call I made was to Regional Properties Incorporated. It was too late in the evening for the business line, so I left a message for Gwen Adler that said I wanted to speak urgently about my status as co-signer on the Cloverfield lease and about removing my name under the exit clause I had reviewed in Section 14B of the addendum. I asked her to call me before 9 a.m. the next morning. She called at 8:52 a.m. on a Saturday, which told me she took co-signer exit requests seriously. The second call I made that night was to the insurance company. I was the named policyholder. I requested a cancellation of the homeowner's policy effective at the end of the billing cycle. The representative told me the next billing date was May 12th and that I could cancel before then with no penalty. I confirmed the cancellation on Monday. The third call was to the utility company. The gas, electric, and water accounts for the Cloverfield address had been set up in my name in January 2022, auto-drafted from my checking account on the 14th of each month. I requested a transfer of account holder status to my parents. The representative said the transfer would take 5 to 7 business days and that the current auto draft would not run during the transition period. The fourth call was to my bank. I canceled the standing transfer of $1,847 that had been going out on the 1st of every month for 37 months. The banker confirmed the cancellation would take effect before the next scheduled date of June 1st. She asked if there was anything else I needed. I said no. I thanked her. I closed the laptop. It was 12:34 a.m. Something in me finally hardened instead of bent. Not dramatically. There was no triumph in it, no fist on the table, no words spoken to the ceiling. I just closed the laptop and sat in the quiet of my apartment and listened to the city outside my window making its ordinary sounds, and for the first time in 3 years, I did not feel the weight of a house that did not belong to me sitting somewhere in the back of my chest. In the days that followed, I walked to work instead of taking the subway. I needed the movement. Each morning I was out the door by 7:30 a.m., walking 23 minutes through the neighborhood I had chosen for myself, past the coffee shop on the corner and the building with the green awning and the woman who walked her dogs at the same time every morning.
It was ordinary.
It was mine. I called attorney Nina Osei on Thursday, May 9th, to understand my co-signer liability during the exit process. Nina told me that Section 14B of my addendum allowed for co-signer release with written notice and a 30-day cure period for the primary tenants to demonstrate independent payment capability. She said Gwen Adler had been correct to take my request seriously. Nina also told me that if the primary tenants defaulted during the transition before my release was formally completed, I could still be pursued for arrears. She said this calmly, and I appreciated that she did not soften it. Her consultation fee was $225. I paid it and considered it the most useful money I had spent in 3 years. On May 12th, the homeowner's insurance policy lapsed. On May 14th, the utility transfer notification went to my parents' email. On May 15th, at 2:17 p.m. on a Thursday, my mother called and left a voicemail that said only, "Diane, call me back." I did not call back that day. She called again at 6:30 a.m. the next morning, then twice more before 8 a.m. On the fourth call, I picked up and said I had 5 minutes before I needed to leave. My mother spoke quickly. She said the utilities had sent a notice that the account was being transferred and required a credit check. She said the insurance company had sent a cancellation notice. She said Gwen Adler had called to say my co-signer exit request was being processed, and they had 30 days to qualify independently or face lease renegotiation. She said all of this in the voice she used when things were going wrong, and she needed someone to fix them. Then she said, "What did you do, Diane?" I thought about the banner. Finally, some peace. "I stopped paying for a house I don't live in," I said. My mother went quiet. In the silence, I could hear the kitchen sounds of the Cloverfield house, a chair scraping, water running, the specific acoustic character of a space I had spent years helping to maintain. "You cannot just stop," she said. "I gave proper notice to all 3 accounts," I said. "Everything is being handled correctly. Marcus needs stability right now." I thought about the banner again. I thought about the list on my father's dresser with a note about eventually transferring the insurance to Marcus's name. "Then Marcus should pay for it," I said. I told her I had to go to work. I hung up and walked out my front door into the morning. Over the next 2 weeks, my phone received 41 calls from numbers I recognized. My mother called 14 times. Marcus called 9. My father called twice, which surprised me because he was not usually the one who called. I answered my father both times. He was not angry. He was confused and tired in the way people get when things they thought were stable begin to shift. He asked me if I was all right. I told him I was. He asked if there was any way to work something out. I told him I was happy to discuss what a fair contribution would look like going forward, but that I was not in a position to continue carrying costs at the same level indefinitely. He said he understood. I think he meant it. My mother's calls had a progression. The first 4 were versions of the same voicemail. Something had happened, and she needed me to call back. The next 3 were more specific. The utility notice, the insurance cancellation, Gwen Adler's letter. Then a gap of 2 days. Then one long voicemail at 9:47 p.m. in which my mother cried in the unstructured way that meant she was alone, not performing. I listened to that voicemail twice. It did not contain an apology. It contained the words, "This is so unfair, and I don't know what we did to deserve this," and near the end, "I thought you were different from people who abandon their family." I played it a 3rd time. I let the word abandon sit in the air of my kitchen. Then I deleted it and made dinner. Marcus stopped calling after the 5th day and switched to texts that were shorter and more careful, the way texts from people who are afraid of evidence tend to be careful. One said, "I know you're upset, but this is extreme." One said, "Mom is really struggling." The last one said, "Can we just talk?" I typed a response twice and deleted it both times. What I wanted to say did not fit in a text. What I had already said fit perfectly in 4 phone calls and a signed lease. My coworker Priya asked me how things were going about 10 days after the move. I told her the short version, that I had been financially supporting a household I did not live in and had decided to stop when the people in that household celebrated my departure. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "How did they not know you were paying?" I said that they knew I was helping. They had just never been presented with the choice to help themselves instead. "That's the thing about invisible support," she said. "It stays invisible until it stops." I thought about that for the rest of the afternoon. The consequences arrived in the order I had expected. The utility transfer completed, and my parents received their first bill in their own names on May 28th. The amount was $1,114.33, which included a reconnection fee from the administrative gap. My mother texted me the amount. I read the text. I did not respond. The insurance lapse was the harder problem. Regional properties required continuous coverage under the lease terms. My parents had 30 days from the lapse date to secure a new policy or face a violation notice. On June 3rd, Gwen Adler sent them a formal notice of potential lease violation. Marcus found a renter's insurance broker by June 9th. It cost $214 a month, more than my old policy, because his credit history required a higher premium. He paid it. He also got a second job. He texted me once more after that, a single message that said, "You really didn't have to do all this." I considered several responses and sent none of them. My co-signer status was formally released on June 14th after my parents provided 30 days of independent payment documentation. Gwen Adler sent me the release document by email and added one personal line. "You handled this correctly at every step." I saved that email in a folder I labeled simply, "Closed." Some families do not notice how much you carry until they have to carry it themselves. That is the thing I kept returning to, not as a way to make myself feel righteous, but as a way to understand what had happened. My family had not been deliberately cruel at the beginning. They had been careless in the specific way people become careless with someone who never says no and never hands them the invoice. They had mistaken my consistency for limitlessness. They had looked at 3 years of quiet, steady help and seen not a person making a sacrifice but a system that could be relied upon. And when the system stopped, they did not wonder what the system had cost. They wondered how to restart it. The distinction matters. It is the distance between someone asking, "Are you okay?" and someone asking, "How do we fix this?" My father asked if I was okay. My mother asked how to fix it. I moved a bookshelf to the wall beneath my south-facing window that summer and filled it with books I had been storing in boxes for 2 years. I bought a second-hand armchair for the corner. I had a savings account with actual breathing room for the first time since I was 23. The spreadsheet I had kept for 3 years still existed on my laptop. I stopped opening it. There was no new column to add. I did not block my family. I talked to my father occasionally. I went to the house in October for his birthday and sat at the table where Marcus had once told me I acted like I owned the place, and I ate the cake my mother had made and said happy birthday to my father and drove back to the city at 9 p.m. without staying the night. No one thanked me for the 3 years. I had not expected them to. What I noticed was something smaller and more real. They handled the house like it was their responsibility now. They called the plumber themselves when the kitchen sink backed up in August. They found a better insurance rate in September and switched without telling me. They paid the property taxes in October. They managed. People almost always do once they have no other option. The night I signed my new lease, alone, in the property manager's office on the 4th floor of a building I had chosen entirely for myself, I sat across from the leasing agent and put my name only on the documents that were mine. Just my name, my obligation, my address. My monthly payment of $1,640 drawn from my account going to a place where I lived and was not on call for anyone. The leasing agent slid the signed copy across to me and said, "Welcome home." I took the copy, folded it, and put it in the inside pocket of my jacket. Then I went downstairs, bought a coffee from the shop on the corner, and walked the long way back to my building in the early evening while the city was still lit up and the air still had the good smell of late spring. I was not thinking about the Cloverfield house. I was not thinking about the spreadsheet or the banner or the 41 missed calls. I was thinking about whether the hardware store on my block carried the right shelf brackets and whether I had time to start the bookcase this weekend. That is what freedom looked like for me. Not triumph. Not a room full of people finally understanding what they had done. Just a woman walking home to her own apartment, carrying nothing that did not belong to her. The most valuable lesson this story holds is one that does not appear in any financial literacy course. Generosity given without structure is not generosity. It is a loan that nobody acknowledges and nobody intends to repay. If you are helping your family financially, name it. Put it in writing if you can. Make sure the people you are helping understand what happens when the help stops, not as a threat, but as a fact. Because facts said clearly and early are the only things that give people a chance to become responsible before they become dependent on your silence. If you were in Diane's place, if your family toasted your departure from a house your name had been paying for 3 years, would you have made those 4 calls the same night? Or would you have gone back the next morning, sat them down, and given them one chance to acknowledge what you had been carrying before you stopped?